player. So, haven't done a solo rant in a while, and I wasn't going to. Not to guest shame anybody, Aaron Shepard, but my guest bailed, Aaron Shepard. No, it's fine. So, I haven't done a solo rant in a while, and that's what I call these. I just got back from work. That's what I call these, are solo rants. It's where I, quote unquote, just get in front of the camera and yell for an hour like a psychopath on a soapbox. And that's what I'm going to do. Nothing I say in these rants are what I fully believe. They are just... I'm channeling my Alex Jones. Jesus, I got some killer acne going on. I channel my Alex Jones and I just start yelling. And going with whatever's off the top of my head. And I try to cite things from memory. I don't look anything up. I try to cite from memory. And I don't know what the thesis is until the end of the episode. So I don't actually... It's a lot like graphic design, actually, where you're trying to make like an art piece and you don't know what the fuck it is that you're making until it's almost finished. And what an arrogant thing to call it an art piece. It's a fucking piece of shit. Point being, some random things on my mind. So... I'm just trying to look at the big picture of shit. And I'm not entirely sure how to look at it. So, because I clearly always start with this. Raven Rock by Garrett Graff. Come on, don't fucking cut out on me now. Raven Rock by Garrett Graff. He talks about these like nuclear flash detectors that were put on the top of telephone poles all throughout America. Just like little things the size of like a small trash can, maybe like a beach ball, put on top of telephone poles that could register the gamma flash and the X-ray flash of a nuclear weapon, obviously leaving ground zero at light speed, and which actually are unique from even supernovas. It doesn't necessarily mean they're stronger, it just means that they have their own unique signature. And this is all declassified shit. This is in the book Raven Rock by Garrett Graff, who's a professor at Georgetown and is a top writer for Politico. He also has another great book called Dawn of the Code War, as well as The Last Plane in the Sky and The Threat Matrix. He's a fucking awesome author. But yeah, so he talks about this in Raven Rock. And the purpose of these things was that they could detect the flash of an atomic bomb and send the signal to the Pentagon or wherever the relay office was. And it wouldn't even necessarily be a signal so much as it would be the absence of a signal. You know, it's something like it shoots, you know, it's like something crazy. Even back in like the 60s, it was like it pulsed 3 times a second. And on a side note, there's always kind of a funny thing I think about is how conspiracy that sounds if you didn't know it now in 2020. I mean, this book came out like, what, last year, maybe 2 years ago. How conspiratorial that sounds and how conspiratorial that would be taken if you said it in the 50s. Like, no, not on a military base, not in the White House, but here in fucking suburban Atlanta, you see that light pole, you see that telephone pole, see that little white thing on top? Yeah, Grandpa, that's a transformer. No, that is a gamma ray flash detector. For what? For if the Soviets drop multi-megaton thermonuclear warheads scattered from a MIRV coming in at Mach 23, shot from liquid-fueled rockets on the other side of the world. Okay, Grandpa. No, that's what it is, I swear. But that's really what it was. Another crazy one is to think right after World War II, and really up until then, and right up until after. There's pretty much, I would argue, until Vietnam, maybe you could even argue Korea, pretty unwavering trust in Uncle Sam, right? For better or worse, I'm not trying to go into that. It's just that's what the generation was, and you could argue that that's information control, propaganda. Had on John Bennett yesterday, a guy who grew up in a cult, and he talks about that. But for whatever reason, it's just, you know, Uncle Sam does have the best interest. Then again, those were more justified wars as opposed to we got to go get these people because they're practicing a different economic doctrine than us. Instead, it was, here is a megalomaniacal, well-funded, technologically advanced superpower that's incinerating people of a certain ethnic group via train systems. It seems a little more justified. Point being, there's more of an unwavering trust in Uncle Sam back then. So imagine if someone wandered out into the desert, maybe Groom Lake, maybe, I don't know, maybe Tonopah, somewhere on the Nevada test site. What's the proving ground one? I'm blanking. What if they went out there and they found a top secret base? Well, first of all, there wouldn't be a top secret base. Why would Uncle Sam lie to us? All right. And what are they doing at that base? Well, they're building rockets. They're building rockets. Yeah, they're building rockets, and they're gonna try to go to the moon. And really, more importantly, they're gonna try to lob nukes across the world. Nukes. Well, yeah, not atomic bombs, but there's a new one called a hydrogen bomb. You mean the one we dropped on the Japs? Yeah, but no, because it's about 1,000 times stronger. So you're telling me Uncle Sam's lying to me, and that we got a base out there? Yeah. And you're telling me they've got a super nuclear bomb, bigger than the one we dropped in World War II? Yeah, about 1,000 times bigger. But they're not even gonna drop these from an Enola Gay or a boxcar. No, we're gonna put them on a missile. You mean like the V2? No, it's gonna go. We're not gonna launch them a couple hundred miles. We're gonna launch them from our backyard into the Soviet Union. So you've got a secret base that Uncle Sam's not telling me about, with bombs 1,000 times stronger than the atomic bomb, and you're gonna launch rockets across the world. Yeah. Well, all right. How are we going to do that? I don't know if you guys remember, but the V2 was pretty dangerous in World War II. And good thing. But hey, I don't know how dangerous they are because we killed all those guys. About that. We killed a lot of them. We killed a whole lot of them. Except for, like, some of them. What do you mean, except for some of them? I don't know. Like, what was that? 33,000? You didn't kill 33,000 Nazis? What, are you still interrogating them? Kind of. They're living here. They're living here in prisons. I mean, not quite prisons. So they're making them work on the rocket program. Yeah, we're making them work on the rocket program. We're not paying them, right? You know, that's what does payment really mean? Okay, surely no one in the government knows about this. Curtis LeMay? Maybe Curtis LeMay. So you're telling me this beloved general has brought over 33,000 Nazis, and not only are we not killing them, not only are we not detaining them, not only are they not working here, but we're paying them? Maybe. On a secret base, we're going to send rockets across the world at Mach 23, carrying bombs 1,000 times stronger than the Hiroshima bomb. Do I got the picture? Yeah, pretty much, or else we can go to the moon. What? Gotta go, you know? But that is exactly what fucking happened. That is exactly what happened. And so, although we now know it all, in hindsight, and we can say, yeah, you know, reality is stranger than fiction, but that actually happened. Okay? So think about that. Think about nuclear bunker systems, the relocation arc. Again, Raven Rock by Garrett Graff. It's the best fucking book you'll ever read or listen to on Audible. Garrett Graff, Graff, Raven Rock. That whole system of bunkers, which even back in the 50s, and it's not just you think NORAD, sure, under the White House, sure, Site R, sure, Mount Weather. No. Thousands of bunkers that not just NORAD were literally, a lot of them were built on, they had cushioned springs under them. Even the plumbing had give with springs and rubber, gaskets, hardened against EMPs as well as bunker busting nukes. And we had them, and when the bombs would go off, because obviously everything above ground would be wiped out, they literally had automated bulldozers that could come out, push the rubble off what looked like a silo. That would open up, and then a new antenna would come out so we could reestablish communication. They had several of these in case there were just waves of nukes. We could just chop one off, we could go Hydra and just bring out another one, right? I mean, think about that. But that was denied to the public. That was denied to a lot of people in DC. I mean, Gary Graff talks about it. He says, what was it? It was during what was the show? Was a show or a movie? Elephant or Cultural Rock? It was like Homeland or House of Cards, or it was something where, for whatever reason, one of the episodes or part of the movie had a scene where they were evacuated to bunkers, and as they were getting on the helicopters, and there are armed Marines guided or directed to shoot anyone that doesn't have pull it out. It's a little gold like ID with like braids on it. And when they put that in the movie, there was a woman who was working on the movie set, who was the what's the word for the not press? I should know that. Press secretary? Whoever, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. The person that takes all the questions. That woman who was the press secretary for the Clinton administration had, this is 20 years later, landed herself a job on this movie set for realism, right? It's maybe if you're making a war movie, maybe you'd want some actual war veterans. Well, they bring her on because it's all about the DC, the House of Cards, the sex, the scandals, the briberies. And she said, you got to take that part out because it's too Hollywood, it's too sexy, that doesn't actually exist. I know, I was the press secretary. Well, that movie set had also hired someone else who was even higher up in the Clinton administration, who said they do exist. You just didn't get one. Like, think about that. So, painting this whole thing to say that this insane shit that we say can't happen, happens. Nukes. I mean, even think about that. What are you doing? The biggest bomb up until that point was, I believe, a British creation called the Grand Slam. And I want to say it had the explosive power of 22,000 pounds of TNT. So, 11 tons, so 0.011 kilotons, right? Yeah. Okay. Hiroshima was 15 kilotons. Think about that. And what is it? And how much does it weigh? It's, it's not that big. Maybe the size of like a small tank. The amount of, which one was Hiroshima? One of them was uranium and a gun type, and one of them was plutonium and a implosion type. I think plutonium implosion was Nagasaki, and I think that was 20 megatons. And then uranium gun type was Hiroshima, I think. But yeah, the one detonated over Hiroshima before, because it's not 100% efficient. A lot of the fissile material gets blown away by the actual, nuclear explosion. But the actual mass of I didn't sleep well last night, sorry. The actual mass of uranium that was turned to energy was less than the weight of a dollar bill. So the point of all this is, so think of how crazy that is, and think about the bunker system. Think about using Nazis in a secret base in the desert to shoot rockets at the moon with hydrogen bombs. When we look at all of these things in hindsight, it seems that we have to open our minds to things that may stretch the imagination now. And you got to be careful with that, because that's not a blank check to say everything's true. The earth is flat and we're run by lizard people. No, that's retarded. But you can't just write everything off as it's impossible, right? And so I think you have to take into consideration that there's probably things going on. I would say not only a non-zero chance, I would say an above 51% chance that there are things going on right now, and not just the given classified shit. Yeah, I get that. Because a classification, sure, like there's always going to be a classified plane that flies a little faster than we thought it could, or better stealth or whatever. Yeah, I get that. But that's like the sort of what kind of got Rumsfeldian, the known unknown. There's the known knowns, the known unknowns, and then the unknown unknowns. I'm talking about the unknown unknowns. Like obviously, there D-Day was highly secretive. Testing airplane engines in World War II up in Mount Washington in New Hampshire, because they could put it up, because for the longest time that had the fastest winds in the world. I think the record was 232 miles an hour, and they would test it up there because, hey, free wind tunnel. But it's also, you're in the middle of fucking nowhere. Mount Washington will kill you in the middle of the summer. And so it kind of guarded itself, and you're in the woods, and no one really, you couldn't go in there. But if it came out years later that was happening, okay, sure, all right, yeah, I get it. Airplane factories underground with big fake hills over them, like the foliage, the faux trees, like 1,000 acres of it. Okay, still a little nuts, but I got it. But I mean, something like even the telephone pole nuke detectors. Crazy, but it still has one toe in the pool of like known unknowns, right? It starts to get a little crazier, right? Maybe a thing outside your house is linked to the Pentagon. But on the other hand, I mean, that's kind of just an extrapolation of radar, of sky watchers during a great book, Command and Control, by Eric Schlosser, the guy that wrote Fast Food Nation. They talk about, was it, or was that Raven Rock too? Fucking a lot of M's. Garrett M. Graff, Eric M. Schlosser. Actually, that's 2 M's, not a whole lot. But that's kind of an extrapolation of an existing thing, right? It gets a little crazier. It starts to move from the kiddie pool of expected secrecy, jet engines, where they're testing them, D-Day, airplane factories underground. Yeah. Kevin gets a little crazier. But Nazi scientists on American soil getting paid big bucks to send liquid-fueled rockets across the world, carrying bombs 1,000 times stronger than the one that was dropped on Hiroshima, and then eventually to put fucking men on the moon and drive a car around. And then when they get out of their golf cart, they play golf. And then come home. Yeah. You have to embrace that there is a greater chance than not, in the truest sense of that phrase, so a 51 or say a 50.1, or under 333 repeating, of course, Leroy Jenkins. There is a greater chance than not that there is some insane shit going on right now. Not the PCA, the 6th generation NGAD next generation air dominance. I just had a hot pocket and it's making my belly go burbles. I'm a grown man. NGAD, which is also the PCA, kind of they're the same thing, interchangeable terms. NGAD, next generation air dominance, and PCA, penetrating counter air. LOL. 6th generation fighter, basically the one without any vertical stabilizers, right? Okay, yeah, you get it. B-21 Raider, got it, right, whatever. X-37B, I don't know, I don't really take that as secret, because it's super secret, it's super secret. This thing has been up in space for 900 days, it's super secret, no one knows what it's doing. Now it's been up for 1,007 days, it's super secret. Well, how the fuck am I reading about it, and how did you find out about it? So, it doesn't really seem that secret. There's got to be something. And what that thing is, I don't know. But, because this is my podcast, let's speculate wildly. Sounds like a good idea, Tommy. Thanks, Tommy. Here's video evidence of my descent into madness. But, I mean, even looking at something like Orion, Project Orion, right, where we're going to blow up nuclear bombs behind a massive pusher plate and accelerate a spaceship to a decent percentage the speed of light. And then there was the Orion battleship, which was just going to go in orbit, and it was just going to aim its cannons just like the Ohio-class ship, except much bigger, and aiming nuclear shells at Earth from orbit. gets a little crazy. Kennedy said, I don't want to do that. So they said, well, we don't want you. And, give him an autopsy. But Cadillac healthcare plan, right? Was his car a Cadillac? So that gets a little crazy. SDI, that gets a little crazy, right? Lieutenant General James Abramson, who I've tried to get on this podcast. He was the head of SDI under Reagan. I cannot get in touch with him, but I know he's still alive, and I know he's still working for a defense contractor. So I know he's still, sharp as a tack. I'd love to get him on. The off chance you're listening, sir, please come on here. But I mean, they had things where they were shooting lasers through the sky, directed energy weapons, and because the same phenomena that causes sparkling or the stars to twinkle, whatever, the diffusion, diffraction, effusion, whatever the hell it is, the satellites in space that caught the laser and then redirected it, they were going to have these what am I looking for? Malleable, movable, bendable mirrors. These mirrors that had to be like as precise as Hubble, but they were also going to be moving. How? Oh, you pivot? No, I mean the surface would move. It would have thousands, tens of thousands of little piezoelectric drivers, pushers and drivers that could deform the surface like a contact to kind of reform the light. Okay, that's pretty crazy, right? In the 80s, yeah, and it did it 1,000 times a second. It wasn't just, to go to the doctors and it's, which is better, left, right, left, right. It wasn't just, you get it right and then we're good. We do zap the Soviet nukes. No, this would do it 1,000 times a second. And we mastered that in the 80s, right? They were going to send up thousands of, they called them garages, Garage, of essentially surface-to-air missiles, but you put them in space and there's no... the other thing is no gravity. The effect is infinite, but it's like the same reason they can make like a rocket sled go faster than they can make a rocket, because a rocket's going up and has to fight gravity. Rocket sled, you put it on the ground and it's, for all intents and purposes, it's kind of voided out gravity. That's why you can get them going hypersonic in like no time. But it's the same thing. We'd have these in space. There'd be no air resistance. You wouldn't have to. They wouldn't be launched from the ground. The garage would just be floating up there. These things would. So we're gonna have surface-to-air missiles, thousands of them, in little. Each garage would have anywhere from like 5 to 25. But we'd have these things flying around that could just shoot fucking rockets in space in the 80s. All right. Okay. What, Reagan got out of office in 88? I mean, Nintendo 64 came out like 10 years later. Like, right? Star Fox. Do a barrel roll. But, so if we can look at all of that, what would be in 2020, what would be the thing that is crazy to us and not an acceptable, a predictable known known or a known unknown? What would be the unknown unknown? And obviously, again, that is a blank check, because you can just put anything, but what would it actually be? I would argue that right now, October 24th, 2020, 3:09 p.m. Eastern Time, I would argue that not just like feasible in a lab or on paper, I would argue that right now we have a tinfoil hat time. We have a fully deployed space weapon system. Not rods from God, because even that's I feel like that's old. We're just throwing a mass, right? Come on, that's caveman shit. I would argue right now that we have an entire constellation of satellites above the world. At what height, I don't know. I mean, in the 80s, NORAD was tasked with not just covering all of North America, but all aerospace, air and space, out to 23,000 miles in a sphere, which came out to, what was it? It was, it was 22,000 miles. and the number came out to 27 trillion cubic miles of airspace. That sounds like bullshit, right? No. Discovery Channel, NORAD, Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Cheyenne Mountain. Why the fuck I just did? It's Cheyenne Mountain, don't you know? I mean, it's crazy. You got all these people up there. They're shooting at planes that aren't even ours, and I'm just like, come on. I'm not doing that. 27 trillion cubic miles. It might have been 22 trillion. It was over 20 trillion cubic fucking miles, okay? So, I would argue that right now we have a fully deployed system. At what height? I don't know. Space station's at what? 220 miles? I don't know. Let's say it's geosynchronous, right? What's that? 36,500 miles? Geosynchronous, I would say it's it's probably a sphere, if not at least an X and Y axis. Directed energy, so light speed, 186,000 miles a second. So 186,000 miles a second, that's around the circumference of the Earth 7.5 times per second. So let's see. 220 miles. I feel like that's too low. I feel like you'd spot it. So let's say 36,000 miles. So we'll just call it 36 even. 36, 72, 144. Throw another 30 on that one. 8. We'll call it 5. So we could do that. So we could do that distance 5 times in 1 second, which means it would take 0.2 of a second to hit Earth. So, all right, that's an acceptable margin of error. If not, but if it's even closer, it just gets crazier. I would say that there is an entire web of space-based directed energy weapons in geosynchronous orbit that are plausibly deniable and leave no signature. Yeah, I would say yeah. Because I mean, why were we willing? Julie, it wasn't James Abramson. It might have been Wild Bill Donovan, the guy that created the CIA. It might have been Richard Bissell, Eisenhower's hatchet man. I fucking don't. Is one of these guys said about bringing back Operation Paper, or starting Operation Paperclip, and then Operation Paperclip 2, and I think it was Accelerated Paperclip. They had all these different names. It was all the same. It was all a bunch of euphemisms. Hey, bring in more Nazis. But what he said is, like a true kind of military tactician is, I think the exact quote was, let's not beat a dead Nazi horse. Meaning, we fucking won. They're done. Hitler's dead. There are some that are still alive, and we know the Soviets... It's not that we're all just going to kill them and agree that we all killed them. We know the Soviets got a third of them. And we know it's a third because, well, we have the other 2/3. But we know we got them. And we know the Soviets are our next enemy, right? Obviously, there's the massive buildup of weapons. Soviets go to Manchuria. We know that they know that we have the nuke because they had Klaus Fuchs and was it the Rosenbergs in the Manhattan in the Manhattan Project. So we know that. I mean, they detonated their first nuke, Joe 1, in 1949. I want to say 1949. And we knew that because the head of the NKVD, Valenti Beryov, who was ruthless, and we knew that he was going to set it off. And we detected that with a sniffer plane off the coast of Alaska. We got a massive radiation cloud. Which, why were they even up there sniffing? We had sniffer planes apparently just fucking going out there on a random fall evening in 1949. And that's crazy because we didn't even know that, we didn't think that they were going to test it. I think we thought that they couldn't get an atomic bomb until 1954, which means that we didn't just have a sniffer out there because we were looking for a bomb. That just means we had a sniffer plane out there. Why? Which means you can only draw the conclusion that there must have been sniffer planes everywhere, right? So we know so if we're willing to bring back Nazis for that, right? And so the point of all that is, so what's the purpose of that, though, right? Well, because bombers, you send B-17s, B-29s, You send all those up. You got to send 1,000 of them. You got to send them at night, or you got to send them in even bigger waves during the day. You got to fly in formation. Shout out Curtis LeMay. But we had the 509th, I think, the 509th atomic bombing win, which they called them the nickel plates, the nickel plated, and it was a fleet of B-29s specifically. Basically, we just duplicated the Enola Gay. They're specifically modified to just carry one big old fucking bomb, which LeMay actually had these weird kind of poetic notes he'd write in his in the margins of his books, and one of them was like, "What a beautiful thing atomic bombs are. They cling to the belly of a plane, much like a baby in the pouch of its mother, fly across the world, released under the ground, and they bruise the heavens and the earth." Just LeMay just doodling about nuclear weapons, just Strategic Air Command LeMay, just heart. Shout out Curtis LeMay. Bombs away LeMay. So that whole thing though was, and what did LeMay say when he after the war? Because LeMay went in. When we went to Europe, when the fuck was that? 42. LeMay went in and he was kind of the hard charger, right? He went in and he saw that at the rate that we were losing B-29s, coupled with the rate that we are producing and replacing, so just the obvious difference. Before FDR went all big dick energy and was like, we're gonna, exact quote from FDR, we're gonna build a fucking whole lot of titties of planes. Exact quote. Not a lot of people know that. He saw that at the rate that we were losing them, plus the rate that we were building them, obviously a negative rate. He said that we had 30 days until we no longer had an air force. Nazis are still going fucking strong, right? He said, I will never forget how unprepared we were. And that's why he was so hell-bent on creating Strategic Air Command. Right? That's why he took the position in Offutt. OFFUTT, right? I think that's where Bush landed on 9/11. Right? And that was in Omaha. And he took it, and he went through base to base, because he got there and he looked at their bombing statistics, and he was like, I don't fucking believe any of this. Because LeMay was cocky, but he also was well deserved, because LeMay was always the front man in the formations, right? LeMay was like a George Washington motherfucker, right? He was like, where's the leader? And the leader is farther up than you are, right? The leader's up there fucking, I just imagine, just smoking a cigar and just shooting fucking redcoats. LeMay was up there in the first fucking plane. I mean, you can only imagine with a cigar is just when there was bombers on the flight line, I think B-52s, and there was all this like jet fuel on the ground, he would go out smoking his cigar. And I remember, and there's a quote where, why did I say I remember? I remember when I was there. There was a quote where some officer was like, sir, like, you can't smoke a cigar out here. Like, there's, gestures wildly at the thousands of gallons of jet fuel on the ground with the whole fleet of B-52s. And he says, if that falls, it might light the jet fuel and then the planes will burn. And LeMay looked at the planes and said they wouldn't dare. Just like, fuck off. But LeMay didn't give a fuck. Richard Rhodes said that LeMay's fleet of bombers took off from islands in the South Pacific like 1,000 throwing stars glinting in the sun. You gotta just love that irony, using the throwing stars against Japanese. But yeah, so LeMay didn't give a fuck. LeMay was head out there. Yeah, LeMay had a really bad relationship with his father, I believe. But he was a boss, and he was a fucking American. Fuck all of you communists out there. And God bless your ability to be a communist. That's what makes America great. Point being is, yeah, LeMay was all about that, right? That's why LeMay was pushing for the XB-70 Valkyrie, right? Mach 3, sustained Mach 3. If you were to look at this thing looked like the SR-71 Blackbird had the parasitic D-21. It was actually called the SR-71 that they called it like the SM or something. It was I think they called it M21 from Mothership, and it had the D-21 on its back, which really just kind of looked like a mini SR-71. It was called the D-21 Tag Board, TAGBOARD. And this fucker was radio controlled, would have predetermined flight paths, and it would pop off the back of the SR-71. And this thing would go up to 90 to 105,000 feet. This is all in the 60s and the 70s when we were surveilling, spying on, flying over just dragging a huge American Eagle dick across Red China, looking for their nuclear sites, right? We did that, and it would fly along, and then it would get its shit, and it would go out to the ocean, deploy the goods out in a parachute, and you could see how this was the predecessor to the Corona satellites, because a ship would come, or not a ship, a plane would come along, and it would skyhook that bitch and just grab it out of the air. It never actually worked. We lost all the D-21s into the ocean. We don't actually know where they went. Fun fact, one of them crashed in Soviet Russia. I am just going off the rails, and fuck it, let's just do it, right? I just farted. But one of them went up into Siberia, and by accident, we just didn't know. I mean, really, just like throwing like model planes or like paper airplanes at your window. Just like we had no idea what these were doing. Skunkworks by Ben Rich, the former the former head of Skunkworks of Lockheed Martin. He talks about how one of these fuckers just went way up into Russia, and we just lost it, and we were like, fuck, all right, whatever, thing's top secret, we couldn't find it. Like 20 years later, I think it was after the fall of the Berlin Wall in the Soviet Union, was that someone came into his office with a piece of tag board, which highly classified, or was highly classified, right, 20 years prior, of this tile, this radar absorbing material, right, and the thermodynamic, or the material science to survive these speeds, cold, hot, whatever, blah blah blah. And they bring it in, and he says, who's this? And he said, a CIA agent got it. And he said, where did the CIA agent get it? The CIA agent got it from his buddy who was in the KGB, which I just like to imagine there's this whole rom-com waiting to be made where like you have like your pen pal, he's like your doppelganger, but he's in the opposite nation, right? But he got it, and he brought it, and apparently he gave it to the CIA guy, and the CIA guy relayed that this guy was looking pretty smug, because he was like, hey, we found your hypersonic radar absorbing material. Touche, we found it, and we're working on it, we're reverse engineering it, but hey, nod of the head to the Americans. And they were like, dog, this is like 25 years old. That's like finding a Game Boy and being like, hey, Microsoft, found your Game Boy, slide that baby across the table. Meanwhile, they're working on the Xbox Series X, 8K, 60 FPS gaming, right? But point being, tag board, SR-71, blah, 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 Valkyrie, 6 rockets. So what the D-21 was to the SR-71, the SR-71 kind of looked like to the XB-70. That's how much bigger it was. This thing could carry, I think, 6 hydrogen bombs. So you could go Mach 3 around the world at the same height and speed of the Blackbird. LeMay really wanted these for Strategic Air Command. So what you may be thinking, what the fuck is the point of this whole rant? Well, buckle up and fucking listen. LeMay, clearly, he has all this experience with it, right? This isn't just a rant. This is how I tie shit together, so stop judging me. LeMay knew how important it was to, so we know his importance of a strategic air command, an entire bomb wing, right? Because, what? I will never forget how unprepared we were when we entered the war. At the rate of loss, it was going to be 30 days before we were out of an Air Force. So we can see where that comes from, right? What does he do? He creates Strategic Air Command. What is the next thing he did? He saw the importance of early strikes. What's the second thing? XB-70, right? That's why he wanted this thing created. Because what was LeMay's logic? Does anyone remember the quote? One bomber always gets through. You can never stop 100% of bombers. That doesn't really matter for World War II when you're just dropping fire bombs and dumb bombs. But what about when they're all carrying atomic munitions, okay? So LeMay wanted, Strategic Air Command, so we're always, prepared. And he always wanted one bomber to get through. And he always wanted, 3? He knew the importance of first strike capabilities, XB-70. He really pushed for it, went to Lockheed Martin. He actually got Ben Rich to start making they were going to start preparing an SR-71, not the YF-12, the Interceptor, but they are actually going to, make one with a bombing variant. Not a lot of people know that there was supposed to be an SR-71 bomber, not an XB-70, but an SR-71. Didn't go through. But, so we can look at all of these pieces, which are all, everything I just said in the last 20 minutes, that's all a fact. That is all a fact that we know about LeMay, Strategic Air Command, XB-70s, blah, blah, blah. All right? And obviously makes sense because who headed up Operation Paperclip to do what? Get rockets to the other side of the world as fast as possible. Always be prepared. Unmanned, right? We see the importance of unmanned through the D-21 tag board. So what is this? Okay, and does it make sense that who ran Operation Paperclip? LeMay. You can see where all these pieces start sliding in. And that's why he wanted that. So what is the natural extrapolation of all of this? What we're willing to do, bring back Nazis. What we're willing to do, what we want to do, SAC, always prepared, first strike capabilities, thermonuclear weapons. What do we see? That there's really nothing that we won't do, right? And I'm not trying to say biggest terrorist organization in the world is the U.S. military, rah, 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 edgy, right? I know, get your plate attendees. No, it's not that. It's that we have shown in the past, this isn't speculation, these are hard facts, that we are willing to go above and beyond to do anything to get the advantage. Namely, first strike capabilities and always getting one through. And then on top of all of that, secrecy. Go back to the nuclear bunkers, the nuclear flash detectors on the top of telephone poles, go to the moon, blah, blah, blah. So when you take all of those variables, and that you know they are all real, so it's almost like tracking like it's almost like it's like if you took a slow motion video of, like if I took a handful of marbles and threw them, and they all have different rates of spin and speed and curvature, but if you could track each of those, you know, a single data point for every millisecond, you could say that these are data points per decade of what we're willing to do. Secrecy, espionage, speed, power, right? If you track all of those and you model all of them, you only need so many milliseconds before you can, if you get the strong enough computer, you can predict where they will all go. And that doesn't just mean they all go in a straight line. They're all going at different angles. Well, you predict the next second, they go another angle. Another second, they go spread even farther apart, but then they start hitting the walls and bouncing around. But if you have the model, you can see where they go. No matter how strange the end product looks, you can, just like we came from a shrew that survived the KT impact 65 million years ago, right? If you follow the line, that's where humans come from. But if you just look at a shrew that was alive during the dinosaurs and us, you don't see it. If you can model all of these, this handful of marbles, everything I just talked about with SAC, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's my podcast, fuck off. XB-70, SAC, thermonuclear weapons, Operation Paperclip, liquid-fueled rockets, LeMay, everything. Secrecy, power, strength, speed, right? If you take all of those, like the handful of marbles, and you map them and then extrapolate with them, you can paint the end image. Relatively, right? You can go ahead a year, a couple of years, but not just that. You can model when they hit the walls and bounce around. But at a certain point, you have to go, okay, we can't model 1,000 years out because we just don't have enough data. But no matter what that, so you throw the marbles, they spread out, it looks like a shotgun spread, they start hitting walls at different times, they start bouncing back. But within reason, you can predict like the weird cloud of marbles they may make as they all bounce towards the center, right? Again, within reason. If we can do that, looking at all these factors I just brought up, I don't think it is crazy at all. I mean, I think I'm crazy. And I think without that rant I just went on, it would sound crazy. I don't think it's crazy at all to say what is the natural end game. A string of satellites. One bomber always gets through, so a whole network of them. First strike capability, speed of light, 0.2 of a second to the surface. Unrelenting power, directed energy, just fucking burn it. And willing to do anything to get it up there. Break outer space treaties, right? We're on one hand we're going, the Nuremberg trials, and on the other hand we're giving nice townhomes to von Braun and Arthur Rudolph, right? The guys who headed Nordhausen, the rocket concentration camp facility in the Harz Mountains in Germany. This shit was straight out of a terror book. Ironically enough, that's also, those mountains were the inspiration for the Brothers Grimm books, but that's fucking Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobson. So if we can look at all of those, and then not only do we now know the end image that we want, right? Speed, strength, power, And we also know what we're willing to do to get it. But we also know that we're willing to keep it secret. Think back to the press secretary, right? We don't have those. No, you just didn't have one. If you model all of those variables, I think it starts to become not only feasible that we have a web of geosynchronous directed energy weapons. I see it very difficult to argue against it. If we're willing to hold Nuremberg in one hand and publish photos of Auschwitz, and on the other hand have these guys out in the desert making big money, von Braun, pictures of him and JFK getting all chummy. If you ever look at those pictures of him and JFK in color, they look like old Brooks Brothers ads. They're just fucking Ray-Bans. But if we're willing to do all of that, then we're willing to violate any outer space treaty. We're willing to jump leaps and bounds ahead in technology that seem like it's too insane to be true, but we always see it ends up being true. And then on top of all that, we're willing to do it and mum's the word and not say anything. And then if someone brings it up, lie about it. I fully believe that. And furthermore, I love it. In conclusion, I'm not even against it. I think it's a zero-sum world. I think it's a brutal world, and I don't think the United States is perfect, but I think we are the least imperfect society that's ever existed, and I will argue that until I'm dead. Yeah, So what's the thesis of this episode? I guess it would be the argument for space web, right? Well, no, it would be not the argument. Would it be the argument? Well, it would be, yeah, why, I guess. Yeah, no. A constellation of space-based directed energy weapons. A thesis, right? That'll be whatever the title is going to be. Be some shitty title. But I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that rant. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So let's wrap this bitch up. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, no podcast tomorrow. I got work all day. We'll be back Monday, though. And if nobody shows up, I'm just going to go on another crazy rant on my digital soapbox. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay safe. Love everybody. Just because someone disagrees with you politically doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means you disagree. And what do adults do? They put it to a vote, and then they go back being humans. Be nice to everyone. Love each other. Be grateful. Today is the best day of your life. Today is the last day of your life. That's what I tell myself every morning. And life's looking pretty good, so I like it. Much love, y'all. Stay safe.